What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to This Week in Gaming, where we're going to be taking a look at some of the biggest gaming stories, industry discussions, and updates worth talking about from the past week. And man, have we got a pretty packed episode for you. One of my favorite Assassin's Creed games is back. There's going to be some major changes happening over at Xbox. The industry reacted to PlayStation's move towards a digital future, and EA is pushing to bring more advertising into its games. Rounding it all back out, we've got what Square Enix had to say about the future Final Fantasy remakes, some new details surrounding The Wolf Among Us 2, and some new games you might already have access to through your subscriptions. What's coming in World of Warcraft Midnight Patch 12.1? We're gonna tell you, so why don't you sit back, relax, and let's take a look at what happened this past week in gaming. So there's plenty of games releasing throughout the month of July, but as far as recognizable names go, this is probably the biggest release week we're gonna see. There's 3 games in particular that caught my attention because I've either played and enjoyed them myself or been interested in getting my hands on them. Starting with Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced, which released July 9th and brings Edward Kenway's pirate adventure back with updated visuals, modernized gameplay, new story content, and several quality of life improvements. And this is easily the game that I'm most excited about out of the 3. I sunk hundreds of hours into the original Black Flag trying to complete everything the game had to offer. The exploration, sailing across the Caribbean, upgrading the Jackdaw, and just living out the pirate fantasy made it one of those games I could keep coming back to, so getting an excuse to jump back into that world with a modernized version of the game, yeah, you can bet I'm interested. Also out this week is Doom the Dark Ages Revelations, a new campaign expansion adding 6 new levels, collectibles, special encounters, and additional endgame content. I haven't actually gotten around to playing the Dark Ages yet, but I've played several of the previous Doom games, and this one looks different enough from what I've played before that it's definitely been on my list. And with an entirely new campaign being added, it looks like I'll have even more waiting for me whenever I finally get around to playing it. But finally, Palworld officially leaves early access on July 10th with its full 1.0 release. The update brings new pals, new regions to explore, a new threat, and the long-awaited world tree. Now, I played Palworld during its initial early access launch and enjoyed what was there, but after a couple of months, I felt like I'd pretty much seen everything the game had to offer at the time. Since then, the game has added a lot more content, and with the full 1.0 release finally arriving, this might be the perfect time for me and probably plenty of other players to jump back in and see just how much has changed. So we've got one of my favorite Assassin's Creed games returning, a new campaign for one of gaming's biggest shooters, and one of the biggest early access success stories finally reaching its full release. That's a pretty damn strong week. But not every story this week is about the games themselves, because the conversation surrounding PlayStation's digital future has only gotten louder. Last week, we talked about Sony's decision to stop producing physical discs for new PlayStation games beginning in January 2028. Since then, the backlash hasn't gone away. A petition pushing back against the move has reportedly passed 170,000 signatures, and the conversation has continued to spread beyond whether players simply prefer discs or downloads. Now, we're starting to hear more discussion from developers and industry veterans about ownership preservation and what an all-digital future should actually look like. One of the first notable responses came from former Blizzard president Mike Ybarra. Rather than arguing that Sony should reverse course, Ybarra said the conversation should be focused on consumer protections. If the future of gaming is digital, then players deserve stronger guarantees surrounding the games they purchase. Among the ideas he discussed were improved family sharing, the ability to transfer or even resell digital licenses, and long-term ownership protections so that players don't have to worry about losing access to games that they've already paid for. Hideo Kojima has also shared his concerns about the industry's move away from physical media. He compared digital ownership to turning on a tap connected to someone else's server. You may have access to the game, but you don't actually possess the data yourself. And that's the part of this conversation that stands out to me. Because personally, I've been buying digital games almost exclusively for years now, and the convenience is hard to beat. My library follows my account, I don't have to swap discs, and if I ever sell my console to buy another one years later, all my purchases are still there waiting for me. So for me, this isn't really about whether games come on a disc or through a download, it's about ownership. And this conversation extends beyond PlayStation. Square Enix recently addressed the broader issue of game preservation, saying the company intends to continue creating ways for players to enjoy games after online services end, though their answer was more about creating different preservation pathways depending on the game than guaranteeing that every title will remain fully playable forever. And that's exactly why I think consumer protections need to become a much bigger part of this conversation. If the industry is moving towards an all-digital future, and I think that it probably is, then players need to feel confident that the games they're buying are actually theirs. One of the reasons I've always liked platforms like Steam is that I can still download games that I purchased years ago. That's the kind of confidence digital storefronts should inspire across the industry. At the same time, physical media still offers advantages that digital hasn't completely replaced. If a friend wants me to try a game they own, they can simply hand me the disc. There's no real equivalent to that in an all-digital ecosystem, and that's why I don't think the solution is simply saying digital is the future. If companies want players to fully embrace an all-digital landscape, then they need to build digital ownership systems that give consumers more confidence, not less. Whether that's stronger ownership guarantees, improved family sharing, the ability to transfer digital licenses, or even some form of digital resale, the industry needs to start addressing what players are giving up as physical media disappears. Because at the end of the day, if I'm spending my hard-earned money on a game, I shouldn't have to wonder whether I'll still be able to access it 10 years from now. So now I want to hear from you guys. If gaming eventually becomes completely digital, what consumer protections would you want to see added? Better family sharing, digital resale, lifetime access to your purchases, or do you think physical media should always remain an option? Xbox has spent years acquiring studios, expanding Game Pass, and promising players that some of gaming's biggest franchises would become part of the future of the platform. But after Microsoft's latest restructuring, I'm starting to wonder exactly what the future looks like. Compulsion Games and Double Fine are becoming independent studios, while Ninja Theory and Undead Labs are moving towards new ownership. Microsoft says it's continuing to fund development of Senua and State of Decay 3, while Arcane's future is still being evaluated. And as someone who owns an Xbox and actively uses Game Pass, my first reaction wasn't really about the studios themselves, it was about the games. State of Decay 3 is a game that players have been waiting years to finally get their hands on, while Senua represents the next project players expected to see from Ninja Theory. These games were being presented as part of the future of Xbox, and now the studios developing them won't even be owned by Xbox anymore. Microsoft says no publicly announced first-party games are going to be cancelled as part of this restructuring, and they're continuing to provide funding for Senua and State of Decay 3, and that's reassuring, but it doesn't completely erase the uncertainties surrounding the situation. Are the games still coming? According to Microsoft, yes, but will changing ownership affect development? Will it affect how long these games take to release? Will the games that eventually come out still be the same games players were originally promised? We just don't know, and that's where my biggest problem with Xbox's current direction comes from. You can't spend years asking players to get excited about the future of your platform, announce games they've been waiting years for, and then immediately turn around and restructure the studios responsible for making them. If you're asking players to invest years of excitement into the future of Xbox, I think you owe them more stability than that. Microsoft has spent years acquiring studios and publishers while aggressively expanding Game Pass. And from the outside looking in, it felt like Xbox was trying to build an ecosystem so large that millions of players would eventually have no reason not to subscribe. And I don't think the strategy worked the way that Microsoft expected it to. Now we're watching studios leave the Xbox umbrella. The future of the platform continues to change, and players are just being asked to trust that the games they've been waiting for will make it through that transition without being negatively affected. Personally, the only reason I still own an Xbox is Game Pass. If I could get the exact same library and experience on my PC, I probably wouldn't even need the console, but right now I still find value in that service. Game Pass has introduced me to games I probably never would have purchased, even if they were only $5, and Xbox Cloud Gaming is something I occasionally use when I'm away from home. If Microsoft can build a reliable cloud gaming service that consistently delivers the same experience as playing on a console, I could honestly see myself paying more for Game Pass, even if dedicated Xbox hardware eventually became less important. So I'm not sitting here saying Xbox is dead, and I'm not gonna stop playing Xbox games because I'm angry at Microsoft. I play games because I enjoy them. As long as Xbox continues giving me games I want to play, I'll continue playing them. But my confidence in Xbox announcing games years before release has definitely taken a hit because these games were shown to players as part of the future of Xbox. Players were excited to get them. Then almost immediately, the studios responsible for making them were announced to be leaving Xbox. Right now, I think Xbox needs to do something more important than announce another game. They need to give players a reason to trust the direction that they're taking the platform. Because announcing games gets players excited, but consistency is what gives them confidence that the future you're selling them is actually worth investing in. So what do you guys think? Has Xbox's current direction changed how confident you are in the platform? Do you still see Game Pass as the future of Xbox? Or do you think Microsoft needs to completely rethink its strategy? Let me know what you think down in the comments. Between PlayStation raising questions about digital ownership and Xbox raising questions about the future of the platform itself, there's already been plenty of discussion about where the gaming industry is heading. But EA has started a very different conversation about what companies might put inside the games we're already paying for. Electronic Arts has officially launched EA Advertising, a new platform designed to expand advertising and brand partnerships across EA's games. According to EA, the initiative includes gameplay integrations, branded experiences, native in-game placements, and other forms of advertising built directly into games and live experiences. Things like stadium signage, branded challenges, custom content, digital ad boards, and broadcast-style overlays. Now, on paper, that doesn't necessarily sound like a bad thing. We've already seen product placement in games for years. Racing games feature real-world sponsors, sports games recreate stadium advertisements, and product placement that actually fits naturally into the world can sometimes make a game feel more authentic. Now personally, I don't think advertising itself is the problem. I think the greed is. If we're simply talking about realistic product placement or brand integration that fit naturally into the game, I don't really have an issue with that. Where I start to have concerns is if this becomes something more. If I buy a $70 or $80 game, the last thing that I want to do is sit through advertisements before I can play. I don't want to see ads during loading screens. I don't want to receive targeting advertising based on my personal data. To me, that's where lines get crossed. And if game companies are earning additional revenue by selling advertising space inside their games, I think consumers should benefit from that as well. Maybe that's lower game prices. Maybe it's meaningful free content. Maybe it's continued support for games without asking players to even spend more money. But if companies are charging full price for games and collecting advertisement revenue without giving anything back to the people who bought the game, that starts feeling less like innovation and more like anti-consumer behavior. And I do want to make something clear here. EA has not announced plans to put unskippable ads before gameplay or advertisements during loading screens. Those are concerns about where advertising in full-price games could eventually lead, not something that EA has confirmed it's doing. What EA has announced is an expanded advertising initiative designed to integrate brands and advertising more directly into its games and live experiences. We'll have to wait to see exactly what that looks like in practice, but at the end of the day, advertising isn't the problem. The question is how far companies are willing to take it and whether the players buying these games actually benefit from the additional revenue being generated. So now I want to hear from you. Where do you draw the line? Are you okay with realistic product placement and brand integrations inside games? Would you accept more advertising if it meant lower game prices or meaningful free content? Or do you think advertising has no place in games we've already paid for? Let me know what you think down in the comments. Alright, now back to the games themselves, and with some notable things to keep our eye on. Square Enix had something interesting to say this week about the future of Final Fantasy remakes. During a recent shareholder meeting, the company was asked whether future remakes could simply update the graphics while keeping more traditional gameplay systems instead of giving every game the massive overhaul we've seen with the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy. Now, Square Enix didn't announce any new remakes, but they did say that future projects would depend on the game itself and what actually resonates with players. And honestly, I think that's the right approach. As much as I've enjoyed the Final Fantasy VII Remake, One of my biggest issues has been there are times when it stops feeling like the original game and starts feeling more like a retelling of it. Now that doesn't mean I think Square Enix made the wrong decision. They took one of the most beloved games ever and swung for the fences, trying to turn it into something even bigger. Now whether you agree with every decision or not, that alone takes guts. I just don't think every Final Fantasy remake needs that treatment. Imagine Final Fantasy VI with modern graphics and a massive visual upgrade, but it's still the same turn-based RPG underneath. Give me the game I already love, modernize the hell out of it, and let the original gameplay and story speak for themselves. Final Fantasy VI, 8, 9, there are plenty of games where I'd love to see what Square Enix could do. The important thing is that the remake still feels like the game is supposed to be remaking, because once it stops feeling like the original game entirely, that's where I think modernization starts becoming too much. So while Square Enix didn't announce another Final Fantasy remake, knowing they aren't locked into one specific formula is probably the best news fans could have gotten. Some games might deserve a complete reinvention, others deserve to be the games we already love, just with a fresh coat of paint. And speaking of games returning after years away, The Wolf Among Us 2 is finally starting to give us a better idea of what we can expect when Bigby returns to Fabletown. Right now it sounds like the plan is to release the entire season at once instead of making players wait weeks or even months between chapters, which I personally think is a smart play. I like binging the entire game instead of taking intentional story breaks, and if it released episodically, I'd probably just wait for every episode to come out before picking up the controller anyway. The full story is reportedly expected to run somewhere between 8 and 12 hours, with the sequel being developed in Unreal Engine 5. Telltale is giving players a freer third-person camera for more room to explore, and they revealed that the story takes place 6 months after the original. The game also appears to be leaning even further into the darker side of Fabletown, which is probably the part that I'm most interested in. The original Wolf Among Us already had one of the darker and more distinctive atmospheres of any Telltale game, so I'm curious to see just how much further they take it with the sequel. With The Wolf Among Us remastered planned for the holiday season and the sequel targeting 2027, it finally feels like this franchise is moving forward again. Would you rather have the entire season available at launch, or do you think Telltale games are better when you have to wait between episodes? You tell me. And while we're talking about the games you might want to play, July also brought a new round of games to PlayStation Plus and Game Pass subscribers. PlayStation Plus members can now claim Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, For the King 2, and Crosscode as this month's games. And over on Xbox, the first wave of July Game Pass editions has been announced, with games like Gears of War Reloaded, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, The Planet Crafter, and several other titles joining the service throughout the month. Palworld is also receiving its full 1.0 release update, which will be available through Game Pass. Now obviously, whether any of these games are worth downloading is going to depend on what you're into, but that's one of the reasons I like having subscription services. Sometimes you get a game you've been waiting to play, sometimes you find something you've never heard of, and sometimes you download a game because it's included, play it for 20 minutes, and realize exactly why you never bought it in the first place. Either way, if you're subscribed to PlayStation Plus or Xbox Game Pass, you've got some new games to check out this month. I'll leave the full list of July's games linked down in the description if you want to see everything that's being added. And finally, Blizzard has given World of Warcraft players their first look at what's coming in Midnight Patch 12.1, and Curse of Ula'tek is bringing quite a bit more than the usual round of class tuning and balance changes. The update introduces the Coiled Isle, a new zone continuing the story of Midnight, alongside a new 8-boss raid, the Venomous Abyss, and a 3-boss dungeon called the Altar of Fangs. There are also new delves, additional player housing features, new campaign content, and Midnight Season 2 beginning shortly after the update launches. Now Blizzard is making several changes to in-game progression as well. Raid rewards from the Great Vault are being improved to better reflect the difficulty of the content players are completing, while the number of nebulous void cores needed to upgrade raid gear is being reduced. Catalyst conversions will now keep the secondary stats from the original item, giving players more control over their builds, and Ascendant Venom Stones will return later in the season as another way to upgrade high-end gear. Honestly, this is the kind of update I like seeing from WoW. Not every patch needs to completely reinvent the game. Give players new places to explore, new content to work through, continue improving the systems that are already there, and make the time players are putting into the game feel more rewarding. The housing updates are something I'll probably be keeping an eye on because player housing is one of those features WoW players waited years to finally get, and I'm curious to see how Blizzard continues building on it throughout Midnight. Now, there's still plenty of time for things to change while patch 12.1 is on the PTR, but with a new zone, raid, dungeon, delves, housing features, and improvements to endgame progression, Curse of Ula'tek is looking like a pretty healthy first major content update for Midnight. If you're playing WoW right now, what part of patch 12.1 are you most interested in? The new content, the gearing changes, housing updates, or something else entirely? And that's going to do it for this week's episode of This Week in Gaming. From some of July's biggest releases and new details surrounding The Wolf Among Us 2, to major changes happening across Xbox, the growing conversation around digital ownership, and questions about just how far advertising should go in games we've already paid for. Now, there was a lot worth talking about this week, and that's exactly what I want this series to be. Not a place where we try to cover every single gaming headline that happened over the past 7 days, but a place where we can talk about the stories that actually matter, share our opinions, and keep the conversation going. So if there was a story this week that stood out to you, something that you disagreed with me on, something you think we should be talking about next week, let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more gaming content, and smash that notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. Thanks for watching. I've been JMF Awesome, and I'll see you next time on This Week in Gaming.